Welcome back to this week's episode of Coffee Corner Motorsport, Four Beans, the F1 show. Now, this is episode 2 of the Espresso News, where I bring you all of the latest from the world of Formula One and just what's happening in the paddock straight to your podcast. Now, with regards to this podcast, like I said last week on episode 1, this is all about just delving into those daily headlines that I bring you every day and just going into them in a little bit more detail and a little bit more into what they actually mean, rather than that snapshot you see every morning, if, of course, you're a subscriber. Now, that is going to be a nice little segment into my next part, which is, of course, the housekeeping. And that is, of course, if you haven't already, please hit that follow, that like, that subscribe button, whatever is available to you on the platform you're listening to this podcast on. So you can hear more of me, basically. Let's be honest, that's what all that's about. But with regards to this is the Coffee Corner Motorsport Four Beans podcast. And yeah, let's get into it. So, we cannot start this week by not discussing Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari, the story that has dominated not only the Formula One headlines, but headlines in general. We finally got it. Lewis Hamilton not only arriving at Ferrari, but also, of course, driving at Ferrari. And my word, what an absolute media buzz this turned out to be. I mean, this was broadcast like everywhere in terms of social media. Every single news feed I saw as I was refreshing was just Lewis. Great to see. Probably not if you're not a Lewis Hamilton fan, but you know what? Just for the sport in general, it's amazing to see just the reach that this move's had and the excitement it brings with it. I said on my podcast and also on a couple of lives that you may not be a Lewis Hamilton fan, you may not be a Ferrari fan, but how can you not be a Formula One fan and not be excited about what this move potentially means? It means so much. There's so many questions it raises, so much excitement it builds. And it just leads us into this 2025 season. It's just promising so much. I mean, we could all be less spectacularly, left wanting as such, and it might turn out to be the worst season ever. But hey, let's not spoil the anticipation before the season starts. But yeah, Lewis to Ferrari, and what a masterstroke from the Ferrari media team. We've had all the teasers leading up to this. We've had all of this stuff where they've been, building up to it. And then, of course, beginning this week, we had that arrival in Maranello of Lewis Hamilton. And it was just so classily done. I mean, the initial photo of him in front of Enzo Ferrari's house with the 7 windows, a doorway to the 8th. Yeah, the nice touch of the Ferrari F40, the navy suit that only had the red soles on it, the lack of sponsors, the lack of trademarks on it, the lack of commercial in a world where we're so used to, all of these things being done commercially. We suddenly had Lewis Hamilton in a suit with an F40 in front of Enzo Ferrari's house, and not a bit of marketing in sight in terms of, not a Shell logo, not anything. It was great to see. It had been teased for it. Of course, we see the news now that Lewis is assembling his team. We know that Angela Cullen has come back. We teased that on the podcast last week. That got confirmed this week. She was actually there when he took to the test on Wednesday, I think it was, when he drove the SF23. So she is now part of his backroom team. She's been employed by Mission 44. And she will provide part of the team that is obviously his personal trainer. We know, as I've said before, on many videos and on the podcast itself, the personal trainers are employed by the drivers rather than teams themselves. So Angela is firmly back in Lewis's camp. Whether or not there was a fallout at Mercedes, I don't think we ever knew, if I'm honest, whether or not she just want to take a year out. We can all speculate to that. But as I said last week, it's great news to see that she's back. And the day itself, it was all geared towards Lewis. You kind of felt a bit, I kind of felt a bit for Charles. It was all about Lewis. And Charles kind of played the part at the end where he greeted the fans and, at least he managed to get some laps on the track and actually share some of it. But it was firmly about Lewis this week. Let's make no mistake about it. And we saw him obviously hitting the track, and we saw his mum there, his dad there. Obviously, like I said, Angela, lots of people there, lots of fans there. And it's just great to see. And like I say, Ferrari have nailed it media-wise. They've absolutely been spot on with their marketing. They've been teasing, but not over, overplaying it. They've not been pushing it down our throats. They've been gently, driving us into it. And then we were, of course, rewarded with that run on the track. Now, I touched on this a bit on one of my videos this week when people talk about liveries and sponsors and stuff like that. Now, with the F1 75 launch, you're not allowed to launch a livery. That's the deal that F1 have come up with the teams. All the teams are going to do their livery at this F1 75 launch, obviously at the O2 on February the 18th. And with regards to that, a lot of teams have got kind of running last year's livery minus a couple of sponsors, or doing a one-off livery, which I think Williams are going to launch the is it the FW46 this year, or is it the 47? I can't remember. But the new Williams is going to be launched with like a one-off livery, and that's the team's appeasing the sponsors, but whilst also not falling foul of obviously Formula One their regulations. So what we saw on Lewis's car was a bit of last year's livery kind of mismatched with some new sponsors on it, and it won't be the livery that we see. We're still expecting that darker shaded red. The yellow helmet was a great touch. I hope that stays. Really offset. Yeah, that Ferrari yellow just looks amazing in that car. So we know that had a deeper shade of red on the numbers and things. So we're kind of assuming that's a nod towards it. As we see with the social media teasers, it seems to be that darker red. So still fingers crossed we're going to get a different shade of red for Ferrari, doing something a little bit different. But like I say, you cannot be happy with that launch if you're Ferrari. It had absolutely everything it needed in terms of getting the message out there. And like I say, Lewis in a Ferrari seems a bit surreal. It's been a long time coming, but it was great to see. We're going to move on to a team who were very much on the ascendancy and are very much in the limelight this week. And that is, of course, Haas. Now, 𝐼𝐾𝐄 did a roundtable with reporters on Monday. So that's where a lot of this news around Haas is coming out from. He did basically a sit down with a lot of reporters, talk about the next steps for the team, talk about what's going forward. We can't go past that move, of course, of Laura Muller being the first female race engineer in Formula One. We can't skip past that. Absolutely amazing news that Haas have done this. And not just that, they made a series of appointments, which are internal appointments and very diverse appointments. It is great to see Haas leading the way on this. And hopefully other Formula One teams will see it and see the positivity and follow suit. But yeah, let's just take a moment to acknowledge that. Long overdue, but hopefully just opens the door. She's a great addition. She's got a wealth of experience doing things such as sports car, DTM, other series as well, including Le Mans. So it's not as if it's just a token appointment, far from it. It's someone who deserves to be there, who's going to be good there. And actually, I, for one, am here for it. It is great to see. But in terms of Haas as an overall, let's just go back 12 months when everyone was talking about Gunther Steiner going and how it was going to be bad news for Haas and how actually, what was 𝐾𝐲 going to do with no experience, obviously, in terms of running the team, very much a engineer background. I look at this two ways. I kind of feel a bit for Gunther Steiner because there is a bit of an appreciation for the job he did with Haas, with the constraints that he had with that Gene Haas put in place for him. Very shoestring budget, very limited resources, and he did what he could. Without him, Haas would not be here. So I think there's got to be an acknowledgement of that. But there's also got to be an acknowledgement of what's happening under 𝐾𝐲, which is the changes. We're seeing this year the testing in previous car program, something we've never had before. Now, we've seen that the drivers have done it. We're hearing that Kevin Magnussen is going to be signed back to Haas to do this testing in previous cars. Now, under the new regulations, if you're a current driver on the Formula One grid, you've actually got a limit to how many you can drive. You can only drive 1,000 kilometres in terms of testing in previous cars. It's something the FIA brought in when Max did testing for Red Bull last year, and a lot of teams got upset about that as a way to develop their car. So the FIA put that rule in place. So Haas's answer is they're going to go outside and bring back Kevin, who's got the experience to how they develop the team, give them the information they need, but is not obviously part of the current grid, which means he's not bound by the 1,000 kilometres. Now, I believe it's 20 days you get alongside that. So you can do 20 days of testing previous cars. And ultimately, all of this is coming from the Toyota money, the Toyota Gazoo Racing inputs that we saw last year. Obviously, MoneyGram being there as a title sponsor again. But this is coming from, Gene Haas has said, this is the first time that he's been able to actually, not put his own money into the team. They're self-sufficient, they're spending their own money. It's something which is, we've seen with the other teams in terms of Formula One, but something that Haas have always been we've always assumed they've never had the money to spend, or Gene's been reluctant to spend. Whatever that may be, Gene is now saying it's not his money going in, and actually now this is Haas's money being reinvested, which is absolutely, from a sustainability point of view, fantastic to see, and in measures to the cost cap working. Follows with the page and listens to the podcast will know I'm not a massive advocate of the cost cap because I think it stifles innovation. I think it stifles development. I think it's unfair on what it does to the staff in terms of limiting how much they can earn potentially, and also limiting their opportunities because, of course, we've got salaries and things included in it. I'm not a fan because of what it does to the factory, so you can't develop your factory outside the capex, things like that. So there are things in the cost cap which I don't personally agree with, but I think in terms of making a team viable, it's proven that it gives teams the model and the confidence, and also investors, because investors can confidently actually bring money into a team, knowing that actually the team aren't reckless and they're going to fold, they're going to lose. So it's a two-way thing. Yes, I'm the first to say there are disadvantages, but I'm also the first to admit when there are benefits to it. So we are definitely in a cost cap era now of, sort of helping the teams out and helping them become stable. Now, in terms of testing previous cars, we know they're going to run that. Like I said, Kevin Magnussen's going to do that. They're also going to go through a shakedown of their new car, which I believe is the VF25, if I remember rightly, in terms of the car name. Apologies if I'm getting the car names wrong. I'm trying to remember them off the top of my head. Should make some notes really on these, shouldn't I? But yeah, in terms of the Haas, they're going to do a shakedown at Silverstone with just Esteban Ocon. And it is purely a shakedown. There's been a lot of talk about why Esteban, and 𝐿𝐾𝐲 alluded to this quite a lot. He said that the idea is it is just installation. It's just a run around Silverstone to make sure everything's working before they pack the car up and take it to Bahrain for pre-season testing, in which they will both get equal time and they will get Ollie Behrman back in the car. What they said is with Esteban, he gives them the experience to know what's wrong with the car and what to expect during a shakedown. Now, Ollie hasn't done that yet, and they obviously have limited time and limited resources to do it. So that's why they've chosen Esteban Ocon. There's no other reasons, no other favouritism. It's just purely based on his experience to be able to do the shakedown, give them the feedback they need, and make sure everything's right so that when they hit Bahrain, they can hit it on the ground running and they can get Ollie in the car as well. So if you do see that, it's not a slur in any way to Ollie or his ability. It's purely done for that reason and that reason only. But you just can't deny that Haas seemed to be a team on the move. You're lucky to miss out on 6th place last year, obviously getting 7th. If Alpine didn't have that Brazil double podium, they probably would have got 6th place. I'm excited to see what Haas do. Trackside moves were a variety of moves, all geared towards the trackside, which 𝐿𝐾𝐲 said was actually their weakest area last year. So that's why he made a lot of these moves. And he said the reason he did internally, they did consider external, but the most of it was internal because the people were there. They just need moving into the right direction, into the right team. Yeah, exciting time if you're a Haas fan. And I can't wait to see what they do. We're coming on next to Audi getting 100% takeover of Sauber for reportedly 600 million euros. Now, this is no surprise. This has been coming for a long time. So once Audi said they were coming to Formula One, they were going to take over Sauber, they've been working on a bit-by-bit ownership of the team. So each year they've been increasing that to the point where when they enter in 2026, they've got a 100% ownership. We know they sold off part of that for an outside investment already, but as it stands now, they now own 100% of the Sauber Formula One team. So it is theirs in their entirety to do with whatever they please. In terms of on track, I said on one of my videos this week, if you manage to catch it, I don't want to keep repeating it, but on track it won't mean a lot. There'll still be Kick Sauber for this season, and that livery will stay until next year, and then it will change to Audi. Audi don't want the branding early. They don't want it. And also their deal they struck with Ferrari. So you remember that when they decided to take over Sauber, they had to do a deal with Ferrari to keep the Ferrari engines because, of course, theirs aren't coming online until 2026. And part of that deal with Ferrari and Sauber, the two, are that they don't advertise Audi because Ferrari don't want it either. So don't be surprised to see nothing much change on track, but actually, off track, it is now Audi 100%, and they are full speed ahead for 2026. Obviously, there's been talk about Valtteri Bottas. He signed a contract last year with them. It got torn up when they went for Gabriel Bortoleto. So a bit of talk about that one in terms of contracts and what they mean. But I'm not expecting too much change. We know that Jonathan Wheatley's had his start date negotiated, so apparently he's not going summer now. He's now coming in April, which is great for the team to get that go up and running. We know that Alessandro has left his role. He was obviously the advisor, so I think that's going to be, sort of Binotto will take over the interim until Jonathan arrives. Is probably the best way to describe it. That's how I see it going. But yeah, it all change in terms of the name, but not too much changing on track for Sauber, it would seem, for 2025. And then this one caught my eye. This one was about Pato O'Ward. Really interesting podcast that he did, where he talked about how in 2019, he actually signed a contract to join Toro Rosso, and which took everyone by surprise. No one was expecting him to say that. But what he's saying is he signed a contract with Toro Rosso on the condition that he would be given a super license after discussions with Charlie Whiting. Now, Charlie Whiting, God rest his soul, actually died at the beginning of that season, as we know, at the season opener. And what Pato's saying is basically, after that, there was lots of to and fro, lots of conversations, and they ended up revoking that super license agreement that they had. We know there's this long-run debate over how much weighting IndyCar drivers get in terms of super license points. It's been a long-running debate. It's been going on for a while. It's still not right. It still looks wrong. You've got multiple champions, multiple race winners in IndyCar who don't qualify for a Formula One super license, which just sounds crazy on the surface. But Pato was a victim of that and was talking about how actually, it could have been a different story if Charlie had still been alive, how he would have got that contract with Toro Rosso. And we would have seen Pato in Formula One, which I think everyone wants to see at some point. So, yeah, I mean, probably a double-edged sword. That probably also highlights the influence and, I suppose, the common sense that Charlie brought to that role with the FIA and with the drivers. And we're going to come on to that at the end of the podcast, because we've obviously got the sporting regulations that we need to talk about and what the FIA did this week. So, yeah, stay tuned for that. That's coming at the end of this. Don't you worry. I haven't skipped past that one for all those who are waiting for me to make a comment on it. When you talk about that, you've also got to talk about, what's going on. And we've got Mercedes next. So Mercedes have said they came under a bit of criticism, and I'm not quite sure why. So they come out and they openly said that the WE16 wasn't going to be on the livery launch at the F1 75 event. No one's car is going to be at the livery launch. You're not going to put 10 Formula 1 cars in a room with all of the teams prioritized a month before the Formula 1 season starts and show everybody your brand new car. Let's be honest about it. It's going to be a show car. It's going to be a livery launch. If you're going to F1 75 expecting something different, I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed. This is all it is the team showing off their new race suits, their new sponsors, their new colours, and their new drivers. And it's Formula One celebrating 75 years. You're not going to catch a sneaky glimpse of a revelation on a car that's going to hit the track in Bahrain. It's not going to happen. And we don't see that at car launches. That's not a Mercedes thing. It's not an F1 75 launch. It's a common thing that we see. They're either very much camera angled in a way that you can't see, or they're camera angled in a way that it's just a show car and it's redone. Or they launch with a show car and put the real car on track with the drone footage, and we never actually really see it. Because Formula One teams do not want to show their rivals what they've cooked up in the off-season. So they're talking now, Mercedes, they're saying they're not going to do their Silverstone shakedown. They've done that for a number of years now. And they're going to wait until literally, they get to Bahrain, and they're going to do it a couple of days before pre-season testing starts. So not really a huge surprise, if I'm honest. Obviously, this year's testing is a bit different. We're doing Bahrain for the 3 days, and then we're obviously going to Australia for the season opener because of Ramadan there. So all of those races have been moved to later on in the calendar, so a bit difference on this year. But a lot of teams doing it, like I said, Haas to talk about doing the same thing. Don't expect to see too many shakedowns actually happening, with regards to teams. What we're used to seeing them, getting footage of them on the track at Silverstone and things like that. I'm not overly sure we're going to see a lot of that this year, if I'm honest with that one. And then we've got the Williams news on that one. So we've got Oliver Turvey at Williams, who's their test and development driver. He's got mass experience. A lot of people were commenting, thinking he was going to replace Franco as a reserve driver. His role is more around their new sim. They got a driver in Luke sim coming online. He's got like 15 years experience in Formula 1, Formula E, sports car in general. So huge experience to go in that role in terms of a sim driver rather than an actual reserve replacement. I'm still expecting someone like Luke Browning to carry that role out for Williams, or Williams, of course, having the option to take on Mercedes drivers. So, obviously, we've got Valtteri Bottas there. We're going to have Frederik Vesti, I imagine, there at Mercedes as well. We know that in the past they've done that, where they share reserve drivers if they need one. So don't be surprised if you don't see an official Williams announcement on a reserve. It might just be they're tapping into that reserve network of Mercedes as their engine supplier. We know, of course, that Williams are carrying on with Mercedes engines. So therefore, it would make perfect sense to do it. And when you've got, Mercedes will bring a reserve driver to the track with them for almost every race, and they will foot the bill of that. So from Williams' point of view, it's a really good cost-saving measure to do on that front. So, Oliver is their new test development driver. They're obviously investing in sim, which is great to see. Shane Fowles is, trying to hit the season running. We obviously know we've got Carlos this year. We talked about that last week, so I didn't go too much into that one. But it's exciting times for Williams as we head into 2025 to see exactly what they're going to do and exactly what they've got cooking with those two drivers, and obviously where the team goes with regards to 2026 preparation as well. And then we've got to talk about, before we do the FIA and close off with that one, and because I'm probably going to need 10 minutes to talk about the FIA, let's be brutally honest about it. The other announcement I saw this week, which one does it? I saw the Visa Cash App RB announcement where they teamed up with an Italian company. That's to do with making their factory more sustainable. So we know that what you save in terms of the sustainability, you've got sustainability is great for carbon footprint. It's also great for cost cap. Let's be honest about it. You can reinvest that into other places. We know that Mercedes done a lot of work. We know that Red Bull done a lot of work. Mercedes obviously been doing work with biofuel, things like that. What you save in that, you can put into car development. It makes sense for teams to get on board this. And the FIA are giving you a lot more leeway with stuff in terms of costs in terms of expenditure when it's relating to carbon zero, so they can actually hit that carbon neutral footprint target that they've got alongside obviously Formula One themselves. So the teams are striding for that. The FIA are backing up with the cost cap exceptions, and like I say, it makes sense for teams to be doing this. So their new thing is putting something into their factory, which means they can recycle the heating. There's no emissions coming off. There's very, very carbon neutral in terms of using sustainable fuel and no water being added, things like that. So it makes sense that teams are doing this. With regards to 𝐕𝐴 RB, they've obviously moved their facilities into Red Bull as well, so they'll be saving money on that as well. They've shut down their factories in, I think it was in Bicester where they had them, which was all the aero team. They're in a purpose-built building on the Milton Keynes Red Bull site, so that will cut costs down as well. So you see why teams are doing more around these partnerships to try and save money on doing things as well. So yeah, it's one of those things which kind of goes under the radar, but can actually have quite a big effect on a team and what they can spend on actually developing their car going forward. So then we come on to the FIA, and I need a sip of coffee before I do this one because this is a mess. So yeah, they always tell me, my dad always told me that with regards to obviously, burying bad news, a good time to do it is when something's going on. So in amongst all the euphoria of Lewis and Ferrari, and all eyes on Italy, all eyes on Maranello, in slots, the FIA's changes to their sporting regulations and what they're going to impose in terms of fines and sanctions. And my word, there was some changes in there, let's be honest about it. Now, to look at this, you've got to look at it in a couple of different lights, because ultimately, a lot of people are jumping straight on this and calling it, completely out of order. But there are some things in this which are good and need addressing. So let's start with some basics here. The FIA are within their rights, and in fact should be, looking at clamping down on things like swearing, abuse, things like that. Absolutely, categorically. This is not about that. This is about, they should be absolutely doing the things and putting things in place that stop that happening. The drivers are role models. Everyone who competes has got a responsibility. They should categorically be clamping down on that. My issue with it is, whilst you can clamp down on that, it is the way they worded it, the way they put stuff in place, that leaves it so open to false interpretation, to personal interpretation, to personal attack, that's got me left wanting, if I'm honest. So the bits in there, like I say, yes, they should clamp down on these things. Absolutely. No one is saying that we should have a press conference for the swearing. No one's saying that drivers should abuse people. And therefore, nobody, and I mean nobody, have I heard saying that at all. But there are different situations, aren't there? So, for example, a driver who's involved in an incident on track who swears is not the same as a driver who's swearing in a press conference. Now, a driver in a press conference makes a concerted effort to make that choice to swear. A driver who's being cut up by somebody and swears, I would not put those two in the same bracket. Now, we're not saying they're going to get punished for every single swear word, far from it. But there are also things that don't help. For example, the rise of social media. This ability that we've all got on board radio, this ability that there's no delay, there's no edit, there's no nothing, so that we can record it, clip it, put it out there. Now, if we're going to come down on stuff, we've also got to help protect the drivers who are driving as well. We need delays on stuff if that's the case, and that's going to impact on the viewing. Let's be honest about it, because everyone likes to listen to team radios and things like that. But if we're going to do that, we need to protect the drivers to some extent here as well. So there's no reason why before Formula One broadcasting you can't put a beep out, which they do if it's going on the main feed. What I'm talking about is the actual driver listening feed that you've got, which is obviously one of the things they advertise as being part of an immersive Formula One experience. Now, in terms of the fines going up as well, we'll come on that in a minute, but obviously 4 times more if you're a Formula One driver. Absolutely, Formula One drivers are a lot more than someone who's karting, for example, or someone who's rally driving. Yes, they should pay more. That part isn't kind of any issue here. That part's not in any wrong here. It's standard and you'd expect it. It's no good fining Charles Leclerc the same as, fining a go-karter. Let's be honest about it, he's going to earn a lot more money and it's going to hit him harder. So I get that part and I'm cool with that part. But it's when you put up the list of things, and I'm gonna refer to my phone on this, because I want to make sure I get it right. So you've got in here where it's got regulations breach. So they start off at £10,000 basically, and then they go up to 20,000 for the second offence mostly, and then €30,000 for a third offence. Like I say, that's times 4 if you're a Formula One driver. So you look at 40, you look at 80, you look at 120 on most of these, to be fair, apart from the final one. But you've got this one. So you've got any words, deeds, or writings that have caused moral injury or loss to the FIA, its bodies, its members, or its executive officers, and more generally on the interests of motorsport and on the values defended by the FIA. I mean, that is just so open-ended. What do you deem as something that's morally injuring somebody? What is the definition of that? How do you define that? How do you police that? How do you say that what somebody says is morally injuring somebody without it being a personal thing? Because ultimately, you can say something, and that depends on the person, it depends on where you are, it depends on the setting, it depends on the conversation. It also depends on the actual the whole point of the conversation. It could be said in jest, for example. It could be said in taken out of context. There are lots of things that you could say morally injure someone, and with no definition that I can see of this, what is the definition of something that morally injures them? And also, it talks about the FIA bodies, members, executive officers, and then it says 10,000, 20,000 plus 1 month, and then 1 month plus championship points deduction. Now, I agree with going hard in on things, and I agree with this. But again, championship points is open-ended. How many points? What's a good thing? Is that 1 point? Is it 50 points? Is it complete disqualification? 3 strikes? Sounds okay. But actually, when you force all the drivers to do media several times in a Formula 1 week, several times at an event, not just Formula 1 here, Formula E, where you have round robins, you have people talking to the media, you're now policing all those. Your 3 strikes over the course of a season isn't a lot, let's be honest about it. And then you've got misconduct defined under Article 20 of the International Sporting Code. Any public incitement to violence or hatred, I get that one. But then you've got the general making and display of political, religious, and personal statements or comments, notably in violation of the general principle of neutrality promoted by the FIA under its statutes, unless previously approved in writing by the FIA for international competitions or by the relevant ASN for national competitions from within their jurisdiction. My answer to this is, you can't throw stones in glass houses. The FIA aren't politically neutral. They would like to say they are, but just the sheer position of what the FIA do makes them non-politically neutral. Now, what I mean by this, and this isn't a slate on anybody, this isn't having to go at anyone, this is just some hardcore facts. The FIA race in places that are politically under scrutiny for various things. There are countries we go to that politically are not right on the surface, and that politically drivers have a view on it. By racing in these countries, you're subjecting the driver to those political views without the driver having any authority over that, without the driver having any comeback on that by saying that they can't answer that. You invite these people onto the grid if you're both Formula 1 and the FIA. So it's not just for the FIA, Formula 1 do it as well. But we see political people on the grid. We see political people in garages. We see political people meeting with members of Formula 1 and the FIA. So therefore, you then can't say that you're politically neutral when you're carrying out political business at an FIA event. It's a contradiction in its own rights. How can you be politically neutral when you use politics to get what you want in terms of racing in places? And like I say, that's not a negative, that's not a slur on anybody, that is a fact. The rules of Formula 1 is governed by politics. And what I'm saying to this is, you're expecting the drivers to have no say on that. You're expecting drivers to have no repercussions on that. You're expecting drivers to have no opinion on that. Now, a driver who shares their opinion on something which is disagreeing with a political party or member or whatever in terms of the FIA, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's not necessarily something that you have to go to task them about. Just because someone has a different opinion on something, that doesn't make any party wrong, nor does it make it an attack. Someone can have a difference of opinion, someone can have a different political belief, and they can air those in a manner that's non-offensive. They can air those in a way that actually, help debate and help raise issues and actually help the visualness of these things that happen. And they can do that without it being an attack. Yet, because one person objects to that, or is morally hurt by that, or it offends someone, we're now saying we're going to fine drivers for that. And also, you can't keep taking this outside of the FIA events. Now, if you want to do it on a race weekend, do it on a race weekend. But if a driver wants to use their own social platform to promote a cause that they believe in, that is their right to do it. Just as much as it is your right to try and put your things on. But the FIA is not there for one person and one person's gender. The FIA is there as a world motorsport governing body. There's a clue in the name. It's called world. It's not called from whatever country the president is elected from, whether that be the current one or whether it be someone from the UK, whatever that be. And also this will change with these rules. It will change on whoever's in power. It will change on whoever's at the top. You can't govern this way. This is not the way to govern. This is completely, immorally wrong. You cannot censor people for having a different opinion to yourself because you do not agree with that opinion. And what is a difference in opinion? So if someone agrees with you and you air that opinion, that's fine because you're in agreement with them. But if someone airs an opinion that's different to yours, they're in the wrong, we're going to come after them. It doesn't make any sense the way it's worded. It's too open-ended. It's too ambiguous. It's not got any examples in it. It's not got any guidelines into what you've done. And it leaves it so open to a personal attack. It leaves it open to somebody who just doesn't like somebody, to be brutally honest, to say, that offended me, so therefore, we're going to go after them. You could just have a falling out with a steward. You could make a comment. Someone you know could make a comment. Your team could make a comment. And suddenly, they raise a complaint, and we're down in the rules of fines and suspensions and points lost. I mean, could you imagine having a Formula 1 driver and suspending them from a month racing because they stood up for something they believe in terms of human rights? It's absurd that we're even considering this. And all because Formula 1 say that they're politically neutral. You can't be politically neutral when you race in these countries. It's physically impossible. Now, yes, you can do things to make sure you don't publicise it. You can do things to make sure you're not shoving it down people's throats and such. But you can't claim you're politically neutral when you clearly are politically active, when you're negotiating these deals and meeting with these figures and having dealings with these to bring races to that country and that track. And then you've got the other one, which is failure to comply with the instructions of the FIA regarding the appointment and participation of persons during official ceremonies at any competition counting towards an FIA championship. Well, that's just saying, you've got to do what I say, is that? So that's not mitigating stuff. That doesn't talk about any mitigating circumstances. That carries even bigger fines than the other ones, but that's just ridiculous. You can't say, I want you to attend XYZ. I want you to be here. I want you to face the press. But I also don't want you to have any opinion on it that might upset either anybody who's associated. That worded, anybody who's associated with Formula 1. That could mean anybody. It could be a steward. It could be, even down to a team member. It could be anything. You could say something on TV that, in theory, someone in a factory is upset about and they make a complaint against you because they are technically a member, because they're employed by a team who's a member of the FIA. This could go on for ages. You could be sat fighting these cases all over the place. Now, like I said, it isn't taken away from anything in terms of driver responsibilities, in terms of swearing, in terms of abusive language, in terms of any ableist slurs or anything like that. Of course, the drivers shouldn't be doing that. That's common sense. They shouldn't be doing that. But to censor them in this way, that just feels completely wrong. And we all saw what happened last year when we had political figures in the Formula 1 garage in the uproar it caused. You cannot do this. And then on the other hand, give paddock passes out to people of a political nature. If that's the case, then anybody who's got any political affiliation should have paddock or grid access completely stripped from them and never set foot in Formula 1. Because by having them on the grid, you're exposing them to a political agenda, whether that be subconsciously or actively. If you have a Prime Minister on a grid with a lanyard that says Formula 1, that says FIA, that stood there for a national anthem, you are political, whichever way you look at it, because you're saying there's a political figure and we are into politics. If you have a culture secretary, if you have a meeting with somebody, you are political. And that's how it can be perceived. It's got to work both ways as well. So where's the driver's repercussion for when the FIA do something wrong? So this is all very good for the drivers, but also what about the drivers here? Where is their repercussion for actually then getting recourse on someone from the FIA who's talking out about it? And let's be honest, the biggest problem comes from media, not from the drivers. It comes from media and how it's spread. And this doesn't police that. This doesn't stop that. You can say something, it's taken in context, and then printed in a national paper, and you can come under fire for it, when actually it's been completely misconstrued, completely taken out of context, and it's been manipulated to suit an agenda, which we all know happens in modern media. This isn't about modern media. This is about driver censorship. They are two different things. Formula 1 should look at how they do media. They should look at media outlets. They should look at who they give media passes to. So, for example, if there is a company or a outlet who have media access and are inciting fans with some of these comments and some of these posts and things like that, then yes, look at it. but not come after the drivers. That's a low blow. It's just a way to coin money and a way to make a name for yourself. And to be honest, I don't agree with it. They need to go back to the drawing board with this one and do better, because it doesn't do what it's intended to do. Like I said, I keep going on about this. This isn't about stopping drivers abusing people. No driver should abuse people. No driver should swear at people. But like I say, there's a huge difference between swearing at someone who's just crashed into you and just letting off the F-bomb during a scheduled press conference on Formula One. So what happens if Max is on one of his live streams and he drops the F-bombs? We can fine him for that, can't we? According to this, potentially we can. How does that stand then? It's a joke. Like I say, there are no guidelines, there are no limits, there's no policing, and you cannot be politically neutral when you are politically active yourself and expect everyone else around you to be politically neutral on that front. So that's the end of my rant. That's the end of the podcast. I've got about 35 minutes on there, so I hope you're really enjoying the new format. I genuinely hope that you're enjoying this weekly rundown of some of the top stories. Apologies for getting on my soapbox with regards to the FIA. I know a lot of people have been asking my opinion on it. That's my opinion on it. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. As I said before, if you haven't already, do us a favour and hit that like, subscribe button. Really appreciate it. And I will see you all next week for the latest episode of Espresso News. Thanks for tuning in. See you soon.